Hey y'all, and welcome back to a new video. Today we're going to be looking at a chess game that I just played, which is a very interesting chess game. Honestly, if I looked at this from like an outside point of view, I would have said I cheated. I would have said I cheated because I played this game exactly as a cheater would play. I messed up in the opening, and then I play a perfect game afterwards, and honestly, one of the best games of my life. I have two brilliant moves. Incredible. Let's just get into the chess. My opponent starts off the game with pawn to d4, and I decide to play knight to f6, which is aiming to go for a Nimzo Indian defense after c4, e6, knight to c3, and bishop to b4, pinning the knight to the king. There's a lot of theory there. My opponent could go with a simple line like knight f3 and maybe transpose to like a London or a Queen's Gambit, but he goes for the normal Nimzo Indian. Pawn to c4, e6, knight to c3, and bishop to b4. Exactly what I was saying. And as I know from these positions, there's a ton of theory. I know a little bit of it. It's a little bit complicated, but for this game, I don't really know what I was thinking, but I completely forgot all of my theory. I completely forgot all of my theory after my opponent's next move, which is the move bishop to g5. And I know this move to be bad. As you can see, the computer gives minus 0.4. It's not a very good move. And I know it to be bad for literally one and one only thing, which is just incorrect. It's just incorrect. That doesn't work in this position. All I know is that I go c5, I go queen a5, I go knight e4 at some point, I go h6 at some point, and I if I can draw arrows. And we play this position, and black has a crushing attack. That normally ends up in some lines where like white has doubled c pawns and black gets a pawn back. It's interesting. It's interesting lines, but they don't work in this case. Either way, I play them anyway. c5, only move I know. Pawn to c5. I know this move is correct because I have to open up my queen at some point. My opponent can take, but taking gives him isolated pawns, and even I can play bishop takes c3. Even though I'm down a pawn here, my opponent has tripled isolated c-pawns. I'm going to win probably one or two of these, and in the long run, my opponent is just simply worse. So he doesn't go for this. Instead goes with this very interesting move, pawn to d5, which from a distance looked kind of wrong, because I thought that at some point I'm going to be able to take, and I'm going to be able to open up the position, but I was still playing on autopilot, and I play the move queen to a5 immediately without really thinking, because I'm like, okay, well, I did a couple blunder checks, but I wasn't really thinking. I thought that, okay, this move makes some sense. I'm going to simply put pressure on the knight. I'm threatening to take, queen takes, queen d2, and win the rook. So that's a pretty good idea. And I know that if my opponent allows me to play knight to e4, I'm just going to be completely winning, and there's not much my opponent can do about it. Unfortunately, I realize my opponent's best move. My opponent has to either move the bishop. My opponent has to move the bishop somewhere, because if he doesn't move the bishop, if he goes like queen d2, which is a move that makes sense, he just loses to knight e4. As you can see, this is a fork with the bishop in the way, and I'm also attacking the queen and the knight. I can't take like this because, of course, bishop takes d2. I would win the queen, even though this might be the computer's top engine line. So my opponent knows he can't do that, and my opponent either has to play bishop d2, which would make sense, combating my pin like this, which I think is a very safe move, or he can play the move that I also thought was the top engine move here. He can play the move bishop takes f6, which he played in the game. And the point of this move is that now you're getting rid of my knight, you're getting rid of my attacker, you're defending your knight for a second, so I can't play this move. That's kind of what the point of this move was earlier in the game, and black is already kind of worse if white just goes full on for the center here after queen d2. After queen d2, my opponent is going to try and play for e4, and then in that position, I would actually just be losing. It'd be a +1 position for white, because white has center space, black has these isolated black has these doubled pawns, and black's light scored bishop is actually going to be a very tricky piece to get out in the future. But luckily, I know what to do. And I know that in this position, I have to go kind of crazy, otherwise I'm going to lose, because if I don't have an attack here, black is just much worse. So I went with this very interesting move, pawn to b5. And the point is, my opponent doesn't want to take like this, because I take like this. You can't take with either piece because you would lose the other one. And you can't take with the knight, of course, because you lose the queen. And I'm just trying to get some pieces into the game. I'm trying to go here, maybe. I'm trying to get my bishop in the game. I want to go with this move at some point. I really want to open up the position like this. And maybe I can like hide my king on c7 and put the rook on d8 in some lines. And this is kind of like interesting. It's kind of like interesting. My opponent here really should be playing the move pawn to e4, and in this case I would just be losing, because after b takes c4, bishop takes c4, my opponent has this nice central clamp. I can never take this pawn. As you can see, it isolates three of my pawns from each other. I have now 2 pawn islands, which is really, really bad. I'll actually 3 pawn islands. I guess this isn't really a pawn island. These are connected, but I would say this is a very weak pawn. This is a backwards pawn, and I would be in a load of trouble. So yeah, if he played e4, the game would have gone much differently. But luckily for me, he goes wrong a little bit. He goes c takes b5. Okay, c takes b5. Very natural. But now I go with my idea, which move e takes d5. This is my whole point, and I'm going into this position here. And after this move, let me tell you, I did not make a single bad move for the rest of the game. Every move you see from now on is either the first or second line of the engine, which is kind of incredible, And it all stems from this one move that my opponent makes. My opponent plays the very, very bad move. My opponent has to play pawn to b3. This is the only move for my opponent. He has to stop this. He has to stop this immediately. But instead he plays queen to e3 check. And now black is winning. Why is black winning? Black is winning because white can't stop the taking of the knight or this move pawn to d5. You just can't, because he blocks his own e-pawn with the queen. Even though it's a check and a forcing move, white now blocks their e-pawn, and what my opponent may have been banking on this is move pawn to a3, but I don't have to acknowledge pawn to a3, because if he take, I win the rook. So black is just completely winning, and I figure out the best move here. The best move here is king to d8. And as you can see by my arrows, this is my idea. I gotta get my rook involved. If I go king to e8, to f8 instead, this is a much worse position, because like even just simply like my rook isn't here now. Well, my rook can't get there now, so I'm not doing anything. Or like even queen h6. This is the line the engine gives. King e7, queen d2, d4. Knight d5. Knight d5 is a nice move. And if I go back to d8, I think it's just a draw. No, sorry. No, queen f6. And now this rook is hanging with check. If he go with pawn to d4, here, my opponent can probably just go here. I don't know. I'm probably losing. So I'm like, okay. I go to the middle. King to d8. And now my rook is coming into the game. And black is completely winning. My opponent goes queen to f3. With a million threats in the position, my opponent is currently threatening to fork me with the king and the rook with a check, and I would be completely lost. But I find the best move. What's better than hanging one rook? What's better than hanging one rook? This isn't a trick question. What's better than hanging one rook? Hanging both rooks. And I play pawn to d4. And without even caring about the position, because even if you take this with check and take this with check, my king hides with knight d7 ideas. If you take this one, well, now you're just gonna lose. It's over. It's over in this position. Like if we put this here, I mean, it's probably mate. Okay, it's not mate. Oh right, I was gonna play d takes c3. Oh right, I forgot about this. This is like amazing move. Point is, if takes, now I take. I'm gonna win this. And if like the rook moves somewhere, it doesn't really matter, because this is lethal. If the rook moves here, this is just a mate in 1, which is incredible. It's kind of insane. Yeah, so my opponent can't do that, and taking this isn't even okay either, because even if you win the rook, I can't speak. Sorry. Even if you win the rook with check, my king is going to hide, and the queen is not going to be able to come back in time to save the knight, or really anything for that matter, as my opponent's position completely collapses. My opponent goes queen takes f6. Okay, it's a check. Takes the pawn with check. King to c7, only move. I have to go here, because if I go towards the center, He can take a rook with check. There's like some problems. Maybe I'm not like completely winning. And my opponent finds the only move here. Actually, no, sorry. My opponent gives a couple more checks for us. He goes queen f4, d6, queen takes f7. I block with my knight. Now there are no more checks in the position, and you've helped me develop a knight. Even if you take 2 pawns with check, I don't care. When have I ever cared about those 2 pawns? Your opponent, your king is going to get mated. My opponent's king is just getting mated here. So I don't care. And my opponent finds the only move I also looked at. My opponent has to, and this is kind of insane, my opponent has to castle long in this position. This is the only way to go, because you have to unpin your knight. You have to force me to take, and your king is in the pin, which is the problem. Okay, so d takes c3. It's saving both the king and the rook. That's the point. Like if my opponent just went here, like this is also okay, but now I can like take with tempo. My opponent has to move the rook. It's just a worse variation. So he has to go over this. He has to go with this long castle. D takes c3. I think for a little while I played d takes c3. Bishop takes c3 is probably also okay, but I thought d takes c3 was just much more clean because I win a piece that way, and I don't have to be down material. I'm be more safe than sorry. So bishop take. So b takes c3. My opponent goes pawn to e4. Very, very natural. He's trying to open up his bishop. He's trying to get some development for his pieces. We're stuck in the corner over here. And here, I'm very proud of this move. I'm actually very, very proud of this move. Out of all the moves in the game, all like the flashy moves in the game, this is the move that I'm most proud of because it's really, really simple. And it's just a move that has to be played, so why not now? I just developed my bishop. And my opponent is losing. This is a very nice move. This is a very, very nice move. I leave the pawn here. I don't touch anything over on the queen side. I need my bishop in the game, and I need my rooks in the game, as you can see by the arrows in the lines. I'm also defending against this square. If my opponent goes here, I don't know. Maybe I'll do some. I don't know, maybe I'll play like queen b6 or something. I'm completely winning in this position. Maybe I don't do something. Maybe I don't do that. Maybe I have like rook a d8. This is what the rook a e8, yeah, something like that. This is what the computer says. Queen d6, queen c8. I guess I am completely winning here, but like this is kind of scary. This gets scary quickly. Either way, I just didn't want to bother with that. So probably would play queen b6 after that move, but whatever. Bishop to b7. It's a very, very nice move. If you go here, which is one of my opponent's main options, I think I was going to play this move, rook a to f8, and after takes I would go like king c8, and I think I'm just like completely winning there, but I'm not entirely sure. Like we can put this on the board here. Yes, the computer agrees with me. Rook a f8. If takes, king. Oh, computer wants king b8, but king c8 is also okay. King c8 is also okay. And now my rook gets in. This is like the point. It's very, very over for my opponent here. In any case, my opponent doesn't do that. He instead simply opts to guard his pawn with move pawn to f3, a move I don't think is very, very correct. And I decide, well, I want to get my rooks in the game. I play the move rook h to f8. The point is, I need my rooks here. I'm trying to maybe sacrifice on this square and get my rook involved here, go for a checkmate. And also, I just want to kick my opponent's queen off this diagonal. That's another really big thing for me, because this pawn on a2 is looking very, very flimsy, and I want to take it. My opponent goes queen to e6, threatening this pawn. I play rook to f6 first, and my opponent has to go back to b3. He can also go here, but I don't think this is right because my knight gets involved. I just don't think this is a good idea. I don't know why my opponent would let me get my knight involved for free. And my opponent has to go queen to b3. One thing I was looking at, by the way, is after queen e7, I could just take on a2, but I was gonna play rook e8, but just for fun, really. It's not even a good move, but it's just fun because like if you take it, you just get mated anyway. In any case, queen to b3. I take on b2 now. My opponent can't take back with the queen. That's the most important part because of this check here. And if he goes with umbrella pawn, I thought, okay, I might do something here. I'm going to try and play for c4 now. I'm going to be playing like knight b6, try to play for c4. It's an interesting position. White is still completely lost. And maybe I like go queen b6 a5. Like there's like a million opportunities here for me to continue the attack, even when white uses it as an umbrella pawn, and that's probably what he should have done anyway. Probably king b1 is the best move, but he decides to take on b2. Now I bring my knight to b6, trying to get into the position. c4 is an idea. Knight to a4 is an idea. Pawn to e5 is a nice move, trying to open up the position, going for some ideas here. He's attacking my rook first off, and he's going after this. And here there's a couple things I want to do. I want to play knight a4 and get my pieces in, but I didn't think this was actually that accurate, because I thought, okay, what am I doing here? My opponent goes king to c1, my rook is still hanging. If I take this, I probably have to take this, right? But now he gets active, and I'm giving him activity. Why am I doing that? Why am I doing that? And then it hit me. I have an idea here with knight a4 that's very, very nice, and this is where I get my second brilliant move of the game. I play the move bishop c3 check, and I'm just going to pick up this pawn. And if my opponent takes, now knight a4 is a fork of the king and the queen, and my opponent is lost. Here, this is mate, right? So I was very proud of this move too. Bishop to c3 check. It's not the most like incredible tactic in the world, I'll give you that. It's not like, oh my god, who would ever be able to find that? That's a crazy tactic. It's normal, but I think it's a very nice move, and this is the only way for, well, it's not the only way, but it's the best way for black to play for the advantage. My opponent goes king back to b1, and now I simply take the pawn on e5. Then my opponent graciously gave up to me. Knight to e2, he's desperately trying to develop some pieces, defend his squares here, and now I decide, okay, what did knight to e2 do? It blocked in his light squared bishop. His light squared bishop was defending this square. Now I'm going to invest fully into my c pawn with pawn to c4. And my pawn is actually only 3 squares away from queening, and it's a huge problem. It's a huge issue. And even though my king is right behind the pawn, and this looks kind of scary to like just start throwing pawns in front of your king, my king is perfectly safe. There are no checks. There are no checks. If there is a check, my king can always like hide on like b6, for example, and there's just nothing. There's just nothing in the position. So I'm very, very happy here, even though my king looks very, very open. My opponent goes queen to c2. Now I play queen to b4 check first. I'm forcing my opponent to the c file, and I go knight to a4. And as you can see from some arrows, there are some ideas of like checkmating ideas. I'm going to go bishop here. My opponent is going to go king b1. I'm going to go here, maybe. I don't know. There's some like many ideas for me to checkmate, and it's very, very worrying if you're my opponent in this position. Computer's already saying to like start giving up things. Like queen d2 looks like a horrendous move to me, but it's the computer's top choice. I feel like I can just go pawn to c3 and just murder him, but whatever. Instead he takes on h7 with check. Honestly, I kind of forgot this pawn was hanging. It doesn't matter at all though, because king to b6 now. My king is probably going to take this pawn at some point. Maybe my queen is going to take this pawn. I don't know, and I'm going to bring this rook into the game at some point. Maybe I put it here, go for something like this, and my opponent simply has no play. Rook to d2. I go rook to c8 now. I'm trying to push the pawn forward. King to d1. I go knight to b2 check, forcing my opponent to take my rook, to take my knight, because if he doesn't, if he goes here, it's knight to d3 now. And if you just keep insisting on it, and now it's queen b1, knight c1 takes here and mate. And I saw this. So that's very cool. And my opponent sees it too. He plays rook takes b2, queen takes b2, king to e1, pawn to c3 forward. I'm simply going to promote the pawn. My opponent goes queen to d3, pawn to c2. He stops absolutely nothing in the position. Check. I didn't miss it, but for some reason I didn't play the idea here. The very simple idea is bishop to d4, and my opponent loses. You can't take with the queen because takes, and I make a new queen. If you take with a knight, now I queen with check, sorry, not take like that. Take, and that's a checkmate on the board. And I saw this move, but I didn't go for it for some reason. I played it on the next move. I played rook c5 instead. This is like my only not best move of the game, besides the opening. King f2, and now I play the move bishop to d4, pinning the queen to the king. My opponent can't take with any of it. My opponent takes back with a knight, but now this is a double check. Well, not a double check. It's a discover check against my opponent's king. If my opponent goes here, it's this with a checkmate. And if my opponent goes with queen to e2, blocking, I simply go queen takes d4, king to g3, and ladder mate him on this side of the board. And this is like the best game I've played in a long time. I played genuinely perfectly after move 8. After this move, e takes d5, which I generally think is a good move. Maybe b5. I think b5 is the only bad move, like the last bad move of the game on move 7. And for the next 30 moves, I played a perfect game of chess. That's kind of insane. But yeah, this is why chess.com is banning me. And well, I hope you guys enjoyed. Always found this entertaining, instructive, all of the above. If you did, remember to like, subscribe, do all the normal things YouTubers tell you to. And yeah, that's it. Good evening and good night.